Welcome to Redefine Your Worthiness with Caurel Richards. Get ready to step into your power to unleash your true potential. Caurel is a rapid transformational practitioner specializing in childhood trauma. While also being a mental health advocate, Caurel has embraced her own personal struggles to transform herself, to turn her pain into her greatest gift. Her mission is to provide the ultimate safe space to understand and support your most vulnerable moments. Get ready for real and raw conversations that will inspire, empower, and encourage full self-expression and self-acceptance. Redefine Your Worthiness with Caurel Richards starts now. Welcome everybody to the very first episode of Redefine Your Worthiness with me, your host, Caurel Richards. Yes, you heard it here. The first episode. Can I get a moment to just sit with that? After all, I almost didn't make it, but here I am sitting here in front of you. So I'm very grateful that you've chosen to invest your time with me today. And I mean, if you have anything to add to our conversation, feel free to just give us a call. It's 800-930-2819. And with me today, I have a very, very special guest, which she played a very, very pivotal role in getting me to this point where I'm sitting in front of you today. So it only made sense that I would share the stage with her today. Welcome to the stage, Kornelia Stephanie. So happy to have you.
Oh my goodness. It's so wonderful to be here with you today at this very auspicious moment of your creation, right? Because you created this, you were ready to bring this impact to the world and inspire the world with your wisdom.
Yeah.
You were ready for this now, and everything just so effortlessly fell into place behind the scenes so that we can create this space for you now and moving forward on a regular basis where you help people move into their, like you said, redefine their worthiness according
Absolutely.
to their own terms. So thank you for having me.
I mean, you know what? I feel like normally I'm on the other side and it's just an amazing feeling to be on this side. So the first thing I would love for you to do before we even get into our conversation is to tell our audience just a little bit about you. You know, who is Kornelia Stephanie?
So primarily, I am an ascension guide. So I am a New Earth ambassador, an empowerment coach. I specialize in emotional processing, processing the emotional body to be free from the core wounding that we were conditioned by and born into. I'm always redefining myself, right? And so I'm a life and business strategist. I am the founder and creator of the KS Media Group app. And then also I support entrepreneurs like yourself to get their own podcast out into the world, to create impact, to inspire, and bring their wisdom to the world through video marketing, audio marketing, and podcasting. So I have been on this path of my awakening journey, full on consciousness, like fully on in, since late 2007. So I feel like I've been paving the path and clearing the path, right? So that other people that are awakening, that have it easier to walk that path, because you know what happens when one person clears the path or holds the frequency, moves into remembering who it is that they are. And that supports others in their awakening too, because it gives them permission to be who they are, right?
Yeah.
And my ultimate mission is living heaven on earth, not in the old patriarchal system, but in our sovereignty. And I champion humanity's sovereignty to be the authority over your own life as an empowered creator, not dictated by someone else telling you who and how to live your life.
I mean, I don't know if I could have said it any better. You know, we often have a lot of conversations about, you know, giving ourselves permission, not recognizing that in giving ourselves permission, we're giving others the permission to show up as well. Because it's hard, you know, it's hard sometimes when the very thing that you're judging about yourself is something that others are judging. So when you realize that you're around, or you surround yourself with people that are willing to accept you for you, it gives you permission to start accepting yourself. And that's my mission, you know, it's towards self-acceptance, because we all have a role to play in this world. And if we aren't showing up, we are actually doing a disservice, not just to others, but we're doing a disservice to ourselves.
Absolutely. When I was just, as I'm thinking about, you know, what I said about myself, when you said, who is Kornelia? You know, another word that describes the journey of my awakening would be a shadow walker.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, walking in the shadow, walking in your shadow with your shadow, you know, the shadow that is filled with the fears, that is filled with the traumas, that is filled with the abuse, the toxicity, and all of that. You're walking in it while at the same time, you know, opening up to your divinity, to remember your divinity, to remember your true nature. But being with the shadow, which is the most daunting, because you said it, you triggered this in me, because you said it's hard. And when I've been interviewed many times before, and people have asked me what has been the hardest part of my awakening journey, and I would say that has been to integrate the shadow into my beingness. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, even, and I know the topic today is just to say, you know, how is 2023 treating you? And you actually just pivoted right into where the conversation needed to go, where I was asked to surrender, and surrendering probably is the hardest thing for, I will say, for women, because we live in a society that forces us, in essence, to just do. So the essence of surrendering is really, really difficult at times. So I had all of these goals, and I knew this podcast would be coming out in January, and I had all these things that I wanted to do. So earlier in the year, when I wasn't feeling well, and just to be honest, I was ill. I had the flu, my voice was gone. I went into a panic, because I'm like, okay, well, how am I gonna do this podcast? Mind you, this is about January the 10th, and we're at January the 27th. And you're thinking, okay, how am I gonna do this? And you're almost 17 days away. And you're not thinking that, okay, maybe you just need time to rest, because what is coming, you need to rest for that. And I think it was in listening and just in feeling what I was feeling, because I was really drained, just absolutely tired. And at the same time too, having these lists of things that you wanted to do, you're like, oh man, I see everybody else doing all their goals, putting things in place. And you get to a point where you start questioning if this is where you're supposed to go. But then you have this quiet, still voice that comes to you in the darkest moment to say, be still, because I know what is coming. And because I know what's coming, all you have to do is just listen to the guidance that I'm going to give to you. And in having faith and in doing all the work that I've done in the past couple of years, it's easy to listen now. But if you had checked with me about 4 years ago, I wouldn't have listened. And I think for the listeners, I want to share with them that surrendering to what is happening to you or for you, depending on how you look at it, is the best bet for you. And like I said, I'm fully aware of how hard it can be at times, but you're going against the grain or you're swimming upstream if you decide not to listen. So in those times that you're having a really hard time deciding, what direction do I go? Do I stop? Do I just breathe? Just listen. You know, you already have the information. And I know that, like you said, that shadow side, the fears, they uproot so often to the point that it stifles you. You know, that's the word that came to me. It stifles you. It keeps you stuck and in a pattern that is not serving you. So it's in your best interest to do something different, because if nothing changes, then nothing changes.
And it sounds to me like, because you talked about how you were faced with being sick and you had goals and plans about this podcast and other things that you needed to show up for, yet you were sick and you needed healing time, resting time. You needed that time.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the energy of the new year, 2023, and everyone's got there and everyone's running out of the gate and let's go. And the mind, the ego is thinking, am I going to lose out? Am I going to be left behind?
Exactly.
And doing that, right? And you had to really choose your values. What you value, and you value your health and you value your healing, and you're being authentic with what it is that you teach. And this is one of the things I love about you so much, Caurel, because you're all in. I know this about you, is that you are all in, is that you will move through it in the highest form of consciousness so that you can be your best self. I know this about you.
Yeah, and it didn't come overnight, so I don't want the listeners to think that it's been peachy this whole time. It takes a level of understanding of self to get to this point. There are certain instances that I'll go into and I'll have responses or I'll have reactions, because I'm human, right? So as much as I'm aware of myself, I've had a traumatic background, and being attached to that trauma forces you sometimes, or I'm going to use accountability here, you choose to respond, or you choose to react rather, in those moments that you get triggered, right? You mentioned triggers earlier. And the thing is, I know my triggers now. So even if I do respond or react to those triggers, I'll pull back sometimes and be like, oh, I was triggered. That wasn't about that other person. That wasn't about that other thing. It was really because I was still attached to some of the traumas. And it wasn't until, I would say, December, and that's last December, that I detached from some of the traumas. And I think I've always held on to those traumas because it made me who I am today. And when I say it made me who I am today, as an intuitive guide, as a trauma expert, you're like, oh, well, if I let go off of this, then who am I? And I remember asking myself, so who am I going to be now that I'm just sitting here observing and not necessarily feeling those feelings that I used to feel, because I was going through, or am going through, that process of grieving. I got to a stage, I suppose, of denial. Then I was a little bit angry, and then you go back to denial, and then you're like, okay, when you ask that question, who am I now? You know that you're in that phase where you're kind of sad and you're kind of just a little bit depressed, and that's okay, because the next stage really is acceptance. And I got to acceptance when I was forced, or when I chose rather, to rest. So it's moving away from that response, or moving away from that reaction that is so attached to the traumas that you're like, oh my God, I've experienced all these things. It's not that you haven't. It's just that, how do you want to tell your story moving forward? Do you want to be the victim in your story? Do you want to be the victor? Who do you want to be in your story? Because you are the author of your story. And I think I got to a point that I no longer wanted to be the victim. So I changed how I told the story.
That is so powerful. It feels like, you did some quantum leaping, quantum jumping, quantum choosing. And that by taking those steps, by having that realization, because really it's about self-realization, self-actualization, you took those steps, and then you had to die to the old self. This is what I mean by the shadow, being present with the shadow while you're stepping into your highest and best life, right? Or highest and best self. So that was a huge piece. And then you mentioned it earlier, the grieving. So during that time, you had to allow yourself to grieve your old self that is now, that used to identify with all of that, but now you're choosing a different path. You're choosing right?
Absolutely. It's almost like I don't even have a choice. I know that we have free will, but for me, it's no longer accessible to stay attached to the trauma, because I know that when I do stay attached to it, it's essentially keeping me stuck. And I look at it as levels. So I don't know if you've ever played a video game. You get to one level and then you have to beat this level to get to another level. I've beaten that level now, so it's almost like I'd be doing a disservice to myself to stay stuck in that level, and I'm already advancing, right? So I think I'm at a point now, or I'm thinking a lot, I'll say, but I'm feeling as if it's just the right time now. You really can't rush your healing. It's not a straight line. So just when you think you're at the end, or you're like, oh, I'm healed, I've made it, something just pulls the rug from under your feet, and you're like, oh, so this existed also. Okay. Where do I go now? You kind of start to sometimes beat up on yourself to be like, I thought this was it. But you don't understand that life is a journey. If you were to get rid of all those traumas in one night, what would you do for the rest of your life? What would you do? And that's a question that comes to a lot of people. Like, what do I do now that I don't have this identity anymore? I'm not a mom anymore. Or I'm not a doctor anymore. I'm not this anymore. You lose that identity. So you're like, okay, where do I go from here? Because you were so attached to it. It's almost like your worthiness was connected to that thing, to that job, to that person. And you're like, okay, so what do I do? You grieve that person, is what I say. You first understand it. And in understanding it, that was just a part of the journey. That was just a portion of it. And now you have another level to go to. And it's not that you forget. It's just that you're not so attached to it. And that's where the freedom comes in, where you're no longer reacting, but you're choosing to respond differently.
Yeah, it's a big bold move, and I think that it says a lot about the title of your show and what it is that you're inspiring and teaching and talking about, and that is redefine your worthiness.
Yeah.
So who are you now, if I may ask you? Who are you now in this moment? Who are you now from this place?
This might sound a little strange, but I'm me. And whatever that is, there's no label, there's no title, because we're so multifaceted that I could say I'm this today and then by tomorrow I'm something else, right? But I'm just me, whatever that entails, whatever actions, whatever habits that I create, I'm simply just me. And no matter how I show up, regardless of how I show up or what I show up with, I'm always going to have that worthiness, because I was born with that worthiness. And even as I say that, I know that a lot of people will think that you have to earn your worthiness. That's the farthest thing from the truth for me. I don't know what's your opinion on that, but
well, you're absolutely, what you're saying with what it means to you is absolutely 100% correct, because the core wound of not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, is the core wound we were born into. And then when we choose to redefine our worthiness, to really be true to who that I am worthy to have this job. I am worthy to speak on this stage. I am worthy to be in this relationship. Because even if you were to Google, what does it mean, I am worthy? What does worthy mean? You're going to find that worthiness means love, honor, and respect. And so you are worthy of love, of respect, and value. You have value. And so even a baby, I want to bring that analogy to it because you brought up the earning piece. Even a little baby that is 6 months old, hasn't written a book, hasn't spoken on a stage, hasn't earned any money, deserves value and respect.
Absolutely.
And that is who we are. And so that's why I love what you're doing with this show, that you are helping people redefine their worthiness, because only the person themselves can deem themselves worthy or not. Because I can sit here and tell someone till I'm blue in the face how amazing they are, how worthy they are, how valuable they are, how much I respect them, and all that. But unless that person knows it and defines it for themselves,
Yeah.
I'm going to be running around in circles.
Yeah, it's going to just simply fall on deaf ears, I remember being around someone, and no matter how much I would feed into her positivity, and I'm not about toxic positivity, I'm just speaking life into her essentially, and she just wouldn't believe it. And I couldn't understand, but then of course a part of me did understand that no matter what one person says, if the person that is receiving it doesn't believe it, then there's no sense, right? So the work does start with you as the individual to define who you are. I know the world tells us, some of us at least, who we are, but the truth is no one can tell you who you are. You know that. So you can walk into this world with confidence if you truly know not every part of you, because I believe that that's a journey. It's anytime you do have some awareness about parts of you, it's not shaming that part. It's not guilting that part. Is being kind and compassionate to that part, even if that part came about as a result of something that was traumatic, something that was painful. It's a journey to loving that part, but it does happen over time. And in loving that part, you can still show up in that part with confidence, despite what everyone else might think, because their opinions, their thoughts, their beliefs about that thing is theirs. It has no representation of who you are. And it's learning to separate that and not taking things so personally. I mean, I know that's a hard thing to practice on a daily basis, because we were taught to take things personally. And as children, we're a little narcissistic, everything's about us. So if we don't develop past that stage in life, essentially we're going to continue to think that everything is about us, even when it's not. So it's just taking those baby steps to understand yourself, to love on yourself just a little bit more, to understand that, hey, you're really doing the best that you can. And it starts also with a bit of accountability. Even when taking accountability feels a little icky, it's worth it in the end, because that's all you really have control over, is how you show up, the things that you do, the actions that you take. And from there, just learn to forgive yourself.
This is all so good. It's like so good. I just want to ask the audience, when you're listening to this, will you share this with your friends? Will you share this with people that you care about? Because the information that's shared here, I can tell you right now, is of the highest order. It really is. What we're talking about here is really freeing. It is living beyond the conditioning of our past. And I'm so happy, Caurel, that you decided to have your own podcast, that you went with it, and that you're bringing this wisdom out to the world. And I just want to let the audience know that you are here every second Friday.
Yes.
From what is our time period that you're running the show now?
So it's 12 p.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Central time, 3 p.m. Eastern time.
Yes. And so, set it on your calendar that this is going to be one of your new favorite podcast hosts, because people are listening. Would you believe that people are listening to podcasts, like 5 or 10 podcasts a week, and they have their favorite host that they listen to? Well, I say it might as well be you, Caurel.
I think so too. If you want realness, if you want the raw truth, I would say stop here, because lying to yourself, fabricating the truth is only going to keep you stuck. And I don't want to see, so many people just walking around telling themselves things. I know you want to feel better, but at the end of the day, if you don't deal with it now, you're going to deal with it later. So why not just start now, so that you can spend a little bit more time being intentional, on this earth, while you do still have some time.
Yes. And what can people expect in the upcoming shows? Like, I know that you have another guest coming in on your next show. What is it that you're going to be talking about then? Do you guys know yet, or is this still part of the creation?
I have an idea, but for the most part, the conversations are just going to be continuing to be meaningful. Like, there's no sense in me spending 30 minutes with you guys talking about things that I know won't land, right? My intention is to speak on things that do need to be spoken about. And for the next episode, I do believe that we're going to be speaking on human design, because I think the first step in accepting ourselves is, one, knowing and understanding ourselves. Because if you have an understanding of who you are, then from there, you can start to forgive yourself. You can start to grieve some of the things that you've been holding on to for so long. And then eventually you can release that and make space to be the author of your story. Because after all, it's your story. Why not? So I'm really grateful for anyone that is currently listening, who is going to be listening in the future. Each week, just expect to have, I would call them co-hosts for now, just to continue to have those meaningful conversations. So definitely stay tuned. And remember, if anything, just be kind, not just to others, but also to yourself. And before we get out of here, though, Kornelia, is there anything that you would like to end the show with today?
Well, I just want to say that I'm so honored that another show has launched here on the TTR network. And I'm excited that you and I came together to do this first show. And I want to thank you. And I love everything that you're sharing, because the truth is that people are worthy of value and respect, but each person has to define it for themselves. So thank you so much for bringing that out.
Anytime. And that is it for us today, guys. The first episode is over, but I will see you in 2 weeks. And remember, be kind, not just to others, but to yourself. Thank you for joining us today on Redefine Your Worthiness with Caurel Richards. Join us here in our safe space for real and raw conversations. My mission is to support you at your most vulnerable moments. Together, we will redefine your worthiness to embrace your own path to personal growth. For more information about me, you can visit indivinetime.com. That is INDIVINETHYME.com.